All right. Hello, Craig. Thank you so much for joining me. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Pre-Sales Unplugged, where we talk about the leadership playbook when it comes to pre-sales. I am Arvi, the founder of Elite Talent, and we basically help SaaS companies hire top-tier pre-sales and post-sales talent. But today is not about us. It's about really highlighting and giving a spotlight to the people behind the roles, the leaders shaping the go-to-market teams, and the lessons that they've really learned along the way. So today, I'm joined by a very, very special guest. His name is Craig, and he is the senior sales or pre-sales manager at over at Gong. And you are actually located in the UK. So I think this is going to be an awesome experience just talking over, kind of like the differences, maybe a little bit of like the European versus US market. And then obviously we'll dive into all the good stuff about being your story overall. How did you even get into this? Your perspective on leadership, hiring standards, etc. If you can, Greg, just give us a quick, like, 2-minute snapshot about yourself, a little bit of a background, so everybody can understand and know you a little bit better.
Yeah, of course. No problem at all. I think for my Irish listeners, I'll just mention that I'm in Dublin, Ireland. I do work the UK Irish market, so
Yes.
but I'm well used to it. But in terms of who I am, so as the title precedes me, it's a case of I look after our sales engineering team for EMEA and APAC here at Gong. In terms of myself, born and raised in Dublin, and went through the college aspect of being a techie, wanting to get into the space, thinking I was going to be this unbelievable coder. Things shifted when I realized that I didn't really like coding that much, but I know how it works, and I essentially call myself essentially a translator in that piece. But yeah, to give you a backshot, it's like a case of going into the world of tech, and probably went through a little bit of a different deviation of where I thought I was going to be and where I ended up now. So I'm happy to dive into any kind of experiences and where I got to from today.
Love that, and I apologize, I did not I was thinking I knew you were in the UK
You're all
market
good.
with Gong, I just completely missed it, so I apologize for that.
All good.
But tell me, I know you just mentioned you thought you were gonna be a coder, and now you're kinda like a translator between the 2 departments. Tell me a little bit, like, what was your first experience with pre-sales overall? Like, how did you even get into it? And obviously, we can go from there.
Yeah, of course. I think it's very much a case where, it starts back where, you know, probably when I was looking at 4 or 5, really getting into computing and getting into gaming. My family always had the latest computer where my dad was trying to fix and break things at the same time. So it was always very much a builder mentality back then. But coming through that and going into college, I really wanted to get into business. My father was an entrepreneur. I thought I'd follow in his footsteps, maybe take over the family business or something like that. Quickly realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do. It looked very stressful. So what I wanted
Yeah.
to do then was get into a bit of, like, I was very much an entrepreneur myself, but also a techie. So for college, I decided on a course called business computing. It was half of both. So it's very much a case where you're part salesman, part engineer. But it's more of a case of I was a jack of all trades, but a master of none. So with that, in the case of going into that and going through college, but of course, when you do that course, I didn't even realize that sales engineering was a thing when I left college. I didn't know what the job was, and very much a case where I was coming out of college during a recession in Ireland. Not an easy place. The job market was quite difficult, but I saw there was some roles for like government incentives to go into something. So to earn my stripes is what I thought was, get some experience on board. People are looking for graduates with 2 years experience, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
with that, it was how do I get experience when I'm in college? So out of that, I spent about 9 months going between two different web design and development agencies. So really started to earn my stripes when I was getting into web design, going into development, looking at the local market. A lot of new businesses, especially during the recession, are looking for cost-effective websites. We didn't have the easy build, Square and all those types of
Right.
companies to just easily throw a few prompts into AI and you've got a fully working website. So
Yeah.
saw that and kind of like built a few for my friends and families. I kind of like set up my own little business. Saw an opportunity there. I was very much a case in my head, being showing a bit of my creative side, but also a problem solver at heart. Quickly realized, those same principles I could use to actually get into business. But I think the biggest one for me was storytelling. How do I get somebody to take a chance on me rather than go through a registered business who's like been in the game for a while? And that kind of found me drawn to bridging that like kind of gap between a customer's needs and really showing my technical ability. Of course, it helps it then you have that rep and engineer kind of aspect, and this led me into the pre-sales piece. I saw that there was actually a role called sales engineering. Didn't really know what it was, but that kind of felt like a perfect fit, where it can utilize your creativity skills, your communication skills, find customer pain points, and then getting hands on with technology as well at the same time. So from there, I spent years just digging in as an individual contributor, and that experience was invaluable. It got me in the door, had experience on my CV, and it also gave me a deep understanding of what it takes to really succeed in this role. And that's what I've taken forward to use to lead and mentor my teams today.
Love that. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into your experience on a couple things, especially the company itself. So, obviously, Gong is a very respected company in the industry. You guys have grown tremendously as a company overall, like globally. And it does not seem like it's stopping, which is a great thing. With that being said, how, in your personal experience and what you went through, if somebody is like, I really want to join a company like Gong or Gong itself. What do you think would make them stand out, or what made you stand out at least? And just giving them some tips on that end, because obviously when you're a recognized company like Gong, the moment you open up an application, there's going to be like hundreds of applicants. So like, how do I stand out amongst everybody else?
Yeah, that's exactly it, and that is it. It's like, how do you stand out from the crowd? It's very easy to throw together a CV together, but what makes your CV different? If I'm looking at the same, one document page, or I've actually got some CVs who have probably 8 or 9 pages. I don't have time to just instantly. I'm just like, I can't read through that, so
Yeah,
that stands out in the wrong way. It also, what I always say to people is, less is more. You know, I think a bit of design going into it. Canva is a very great tool. It's very free as well. If you want to just throw in a CV, put a little bit of effort in, putting in an image in there as well of yourself as well. And very much a case of find something that makes you stand out. One thing that I always look at is I'm drawn to first is what people's hobbies are. Looking for something different. If somebody just says they're into fitness or they're into running, well, it's like, well, what type? Do you like doing triathlons, Ironman? Do you have any medals from any marathons you may have ran? What makes you really stand out? And things like, self-taught musicians, something different where it shows them. Like I had somebody who's into fixing watches. Like that is something that is just completely different out of there. And it's a case where that actually thinks where they're thinking outside the box, and that's something where they're solution based, thought process. So I see that that's part of their personality coming through. And of course, it's always good to have, the awards like President's Clubs, those kind of things that you have. That makes you stand out from your peers within your company. But realistically, I'm looking for people to join my team who give a diverse background, different personality, and is not a carbon copy of somebody that's already on my team. So they're the types of things.
excellent.
It's like, how can I stand out from the crowd? Ensure that give somebody a little bit more information, but also a case where you only want to give somebody enough information to get them excited about who you are and want to know more. And then that's a
Yeah.
hook, line, and sinker where I actually want to dive in, have a conversation with this person, and learn more about them.
Yeah, I love that. And you brought up a couple of very interesting things. So I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit. Number one, totally agree with you. I think personally that any resume over CV over 2 pages is just not going to get looked at. Typically, even like when I review the resumes or CVs myself, I'm looking at the first page mainly.
Mhm.
If nothing catches my attention there, I'm not even going to the second page. Because it's just how it is. Like you said, there's so many applicants and documents that you're viewing. It's just you want to try and get through them as fast as you can because you also have other responsibilities on top
Mhm.
of that. Um, I totally love that you said, any accomplishments, President's Club. I always tell everybody that I talk to, think on outcomes. What did you do as a task for that company and what outcome did it lead to? So don't just tell me, I was a sales engineer and I did demos all day. Okay, what
Mhm.
did those demos do for the company, right? And I think that's what's going to catch your attention too, like looking at it as a manager, you're seeing how does this person that come in here bring value and how are we going to drive the team forward, because the goal is always to grow. The goal is always to impact the bottom line, and that's just a fact. It's not trying to be like mean. You can have a lot of value on top of that, but at the end of the day, is it driving results? I always have this saying with my team that it says, effort doesn't count, the result is what counts. So effort is great, but if I don't see the result, then it's just not going to work out.
Yeah. And to add to that as well, I think it is that starting piece where, what do you like? your job is a job description, but what are you doing beyond your role? Like your call of duty is such as what I call it. It's like
Yeah.
this is your day-to-day job. You're on a call, you hit your targets, you increase, win rates, you're helping to bring up the overall ARR of the business. We're hitting and we're overachieving. That's great. But what are you doing besides that? How are you mentoring other people on the team if you're more experienced? How are you working cross-functionally with other parts of the business to help in other areas? So I even do that from a case of what are you doing? Show that on your CV, but then when you actually do get the job, what are you doing that's beyond that particular piece? So always expand.
Yeah. Love that. And one thing I think you mentioned hobbies. I do get asked a lot if like, should I put my hobbies in the resume or not? Which is interesting because you're the first actually manager that has mentioned that. And I was gonna say to that that I think that's a very like personal thing. I don't think it hurts you having one. I definitely think it makes you stand out if you want to add it. But I also think it's like kind of like what I just meant. It's like personal. Some managers will look at it and say, hey, you know what, I like this, versus other will be like, well, I just want to look at results and that's what we're here all about. So I do agree you should have them. I always tell them add it on there. Just don't make it like a big deal and like have it take a whole paragraph. Usually, like a one liner of, actually what is true to you is great. It showcases a little bit of your personality. And I'm of the belief, and I'd love to know your back or your opinion on this as well. I'm of the belief that a picture does go a long way in a resume because it catches my attention, and I obviously a professional one, right? It catches my attention and it just makes me stare at your resume, even if it's for 2 extra seconds, which is a good thing because you want to draw that attention. And then obviously your value, your experience is what actually sells me. What do you think about the resume or the picture part on the resume?
Yeah, I've even had a few that have put a link to the likes of a Loom video that like it's a
Oh,
2 or 3
very
minute
cool.
just, it's out of the box. It's something different. It's showing that they're putting a bit more effort in, and it's also
I love that.
personalized to me. It's not the case where
Oh,
they're sending a 1 to 100. It's very much a case of,
yeah.
you feel that they've taken the time, they've shown a bit of themselves, their personality in that as well, and the fact that they're utilizing a new skill. So it's putting yourself out there. I mean, the job market comes in waves. Sometimes it's a buyer, it's a employee
Yeah.
market, sometimes it's a company market. So it depends, like really what puts your, I'm not telling everyone that they have to put themselves out there. There's a lot of introverts there who do not want to do that. Same with the likes of putting your hobbies. You may not want to put that out there as well. But it's I would try to get out of your comfort zone. Something that I always say is like when you get into a new job and you're helping with the likes of marketing conferences and that kind of stuff, you need to sometimes you need to get uncomfortable or get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's very much a case where there's certain things where you just need to step out of your comfort zone to really
Yeah.
showcase your skill set. So that's something that, I generally I'd recommend doing, but again, I wouldn't force people to do it.
Yeah, actually, I really, really love that. I hadn't heard of that before, and I think that even if you're not gonna personalize a Loom video, especially nowadays, because right now we're in an employer's market, there is a ton of competition for, the job seekers, and you need to find a way to stand out. Experience, like you said, hobbies, picture, and a Loom video. I think it's great. At least it shows you, like you said, that even if it's not personalized to you, just putting yourself out there that you are willing to do something that's uncomfortable, it is great. So thank you for that tip. I think that anybody listening to this, especially if they're looking for a job or in the near future, you should absolutely do that from now on because I think, it's just the little things sometimes that really make you stand out. It's not rocket science. I always tell them it's simple, just not that easy.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, like it's not rocket science. It's a case of just going back to basics. Having
Yeah.
a conversation and just getting in front of people. That's what you need to do.
Love that. Now, tell me, I want to shift a little bit over to the leadership side. So, you've built SE's teams. Obviously, you're in a leadership right now. What's one lesson that you've learned that maybe every aspiring SE leader should know?
I think it's more of a case of like a mistake that I made that I always need to learn from, and I have in my
Yeah,
career. So I think the single most important lesson that I learned in my career was your job is as a leader, right? It's to protect and to empower your team. It's not to be the hero. So that was a big shift for me. When you're in an IC role, you very much are chasing a number. You're thinking of how can a lot of it's IC, it's individual contributor. You don't feel like you're part of a team number as such. So going into a
yeah,
leadership role, I genuinely like believe that the value was from having all the answers. I could swoop in, save the day, solve any problem, jump in on those kind of complex technical calls. meticulously dissect like the hardest and toughest challenges you've ever seen, and also personally drive deals to closure. But my entire focus was perceived on that and being the best sales engineer on the team. But as an individual, I was always thinking I was indispensable. But what I quickly realized was like this approach is fundamentally like flawed, right? It's what's hindering both of my team's potential and my own effectiveness as their leader. So, my team weren't learning from, they don't always need me to be the constant problem solver. I need them, like they need me to be their enabler. You know, it hinges on, their ability to remove obstacles, how they like not getting in their way, providing them essentially air cover. There's things coming flying in at them. You're there to protect, to make sure that they can actually come up with the ideas themselves. And I think it's also a Gong leadership principle as well that I always follow. It's empower your team, right? You want to
Yeah.
remove distractions. You want to equip the people with the necessary information, have all like them to make the decisions and execute on them. Of course, you don't want mistakes, but mistakes they learn from. If they're constantly making
Yeah.
the same mistake, then there's an issue. But it's very much a case of empowering your team, constantly position yourself like to be able to help them at any time. You don't want to stifle their growth. You want to make sure that they're developing their own problem solving skills, and you know you don't want to create, you want to foster a culture of kind of dependency. You want that piece of helping them to be proactive rather than reactive, and you want them to be self-sufficient and come to you when they have problems. But I always say as well, don't come to your manager or come to somebody with a problem and just complain. Come, if there is an issue, come with that, but also come up with a couple of ideas or solving of solutions in different ways, but also bring data to bring that up. So that's something, rather than here's an issue, these are a couple of areas, which do you think would be the best solution based on this data that I brought to you? So I think that's something a leader understands. The role is to build a team of heroes, right? It's not a case of about me. It's about how do I utilize, make sure that it's a team of heroes,
Yeah.
and then I'm sitting in the background, I'm empowering them, and it's to elevate their performance rather than my own. I sit in the back, I be resilient, and hopefully they ultimately the end goal is to make sure that they're all progressing in their career, they're happy,
Yeah.
and everyone's happy once everyone's happy.
I love that. We have a lot of the same leadership principles. And honestly, I think leadership is a word that is like typically thrown around a lot. And it's like, oh, I want to be a leader, or like this person is a leader. But truly, like once you dive into their actual principles and see how they operate within their leadership, is when you really understand, are they a leader or just like a manager?
Mm,
And I like to say personally that leadership is a lot like sales, because you, like you said, you have to be an enabler. You can't give them the answer. So leadership is a lot about, and at least for me, is personally, is like a lot about asking questions. When they come to me with a problem, it's like, okay, what's your opinion on this? Did you think about this aspect? What do you think, that solution is going to lead to? Just really making them think and kind of expand their own problem solving, like you mentioned. I think it's crucial. So yeah, I agreed. Like leadership is a lot about enabling, and when they become the hero, you automatically become that hero as well, right? Because obviously you're there to lead the team. So I love that aspect overall.
it's like that.
Um,
It's
yeah.
like that piece where you see your team up in lights and you see them grow. It's kind of like you're the parent at the back, being a proud
Yeah.
parent, seeing them like collect their medals. That's that kind of thing.
Very true. Very true. And I was gonna say, so I love that you mentioned like when they come to you with a problem, they also have to bring a solution. I can't remember exactly what the framework is called, but I read the book by Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time. And one of the principles he talks about there is, I think it was called like a 3-1, or 1-3-1, where they have a problem, they come to you with three possible solutions to that problem, and they tell you one of their main solutions, like which one of those they would go through with, and they'll tell you the logic behind it. So, hey, Craig, this is my problem. These are three possible solutions. I like solution number two because this, and that. And I think that framework is called 1-3-1, based on how it's set up. So I do love that. I try to encourage that the same way. And if they don't come to me with that solution, if their first response answer is like, oh, I have this problem, what do I do? Then I just go back to, okay, what are three possible solutions? You gotta embrace it onto them and enable them to come and keep on doing it. So
Yeah, exactly that.
that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Love that. How would you say in your role or any of the past roles, like how would you say you balance for your team and yourself as well when you were in an IC role, the technical expertise with like strong communication skills? How important is that for the roles that maybe right now you're hiring for or that you're looking for? And how important is it for the SE role in general?
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception of like if we think about solution engineering, that you must choose one. You either a technical wizard or master of communication, or essentially a negotiator if you're in the sales aspect. But
Yeah.
uh, the most successful sales engineers I know are essentially a blend of both. And in the process of me hiring, I actively look at candidates who, possess an innate curiosity. Curious individual is going to be driven to continuously learn, adapt, and always think about like critical in their thinking, but it's also evolving with the technological space. So, AI, the buzzword at the moment, everyone's throwing it on their website and saying they
Yes.
do it. But however, it's a case of like the biggest thing, and I've always said this is and to my team is like I look for a builder mentality. I want somebody who is proactive, who's hands-on approach to problem solving and is creative. It's thinking outside the box. If you go to your team and they give you the same five answers across the five people, then you're not hiring the right people. You want somebody who is coming out with a different idea. Now, of course, there could just be only one solution. That's a different
Right.
matter. But it's not very much a case. It's you can either think about somebody who's very technical, but sometimes very technical people can't get across with their storytelling for like the solution piece. They can't express themselves or can't essentially help people to understand their thought process. And that's where there's an issue where it's something very complex and they're not thinking about the people in the real world who some people are
Yeah.
not very technical. So it's essentially a blend of both, right? It's been a little bit like even if you're a part of both, I mentioned earlier, it's like a master, like being a jack of all trades, but a master of none. That can also work
Yeah.
for sales engineers. Of course, there are certain dependencies where certain companies are a very technical fit and you're dealing with different personas who are just purely technical. That's a case where does it do this? Does it do it faster? Is it cheaper? Will my team be able to use it better? That is a
Yeah.
simple sale where it's very more technical aspect. But if you're selling a sales software like Kong to salespeople, they know all the tricks of the trades. They know what we're trying to do in terms of like how we're getting information discovery. They know all the tricks that they're trying to
Yeah.
do on ourselves. You think of like playbooks like Medic and Bant, Spiced. They know all these ways, so they're waiting for those. But it's also a great kind of showdown as such. But very much a case. It depends on the role. It depends on the software that you're selling, or any role essentially. Not doesn't have to be software, but it very much depends on the personas that you're also selling to. So for
Very true.
myself personally, I look for somebody who's curious, somebody who's very wants to stay on top of the newest technologies, strong communication skills, and I get that through the actual interviews that I do. One of the biggest things I always look for is things like active listening. I always try and throw in one or two little trapdoors to see whether they actually bring that up later on in the conversation or they go back to it. And that's where I always try and see whether somebody is like at the end of the interview, did they actually pick up on what I was saying and did they actually try and bring that back into the conversation?
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if the stat is completely correct, but I saw somewhere that a good salesperson, which in this case, you can include a sales engineer in there, they talk 30% of the time and they win their sales by just talking 30% of the time. If you're talking more than that, you're I mean, there's something there that's not going right. Like either the your sales persona is not fully into the whatever's going on. They you lost them already. But I don't know. How do you feel about that specific split? Is that like a good split, or would you say it's more like 60-40, or sometimes 50-50, depending on how the sales convo goes?
Yeah, I mean, like Gong would check those in terms of your talk ratios, so would give you guidance on
Okay.
that. But there's certain percentages, or it depends again on the individual and on who you're talking to. Also depends.
Yeah.
A larger audience, generally, you don't get much feedback when there's a large audience that you're trying to demo to. But if
Very
it's
true.
a
Yeah.
smaller group, I think 30% of the time would be very good. I think if you try and get more out of your customer, if you get your customer talking, it means that they're engaged and you're doing a good discovery. They're opening up to you and you're asking very challenging questions. So the more that you can get them to talk, the more you can listen. And that's where you're getting more information about them and talking on their basis. So you're learning, you're understanding more about them, their business, and you're talking on their level. So always try and get them to talk more. Yeah. So it's very
Yeah.
good to listen to me and listen to a 5 minute monologue, but the latest generation are, our attention span is 30
So
seconds
nice.
or even
Yeah. So
less.
short.
So I need to throw
Yeah.
in things or, stop using like stop sharing a screen and then call somebody out while we're on camera or, firing back a question back to somebody and calling them out by their name. does this
Yeah.
resonate with you? Is this what you were mentioning earlier? You're capturing that within that active listening, and it's keeping everyone engaged. So yeah, I try and you should definitely try and get your customer talking as much as possible.
I love that. What would you say? This is more of a curious question, actually, but you said that obviously you guys sell to a lot of salespeople. Do you see your specific sales process be different because of that? Do you get resistance because you're talking to a lot of salespeople and they obviously know what you're trying to do, or what does that like dynamic look like?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting piece being a sales engineering kind of route or like solution consulting, right? I think there's sometimes I've learned in my experience where the sales rep is trying to sell to a certain persona and they're being very cagey on certain numbers. So thinking of things that, what's your current forecast accuracy been in the last 12 months? Like how close have
Hmm.
you into hitting your target? Where are you currently performing? Where do you see? They generally tend to like back off a bit when they're asked certain questions, and so that's with certain personas, right? And when you're dealing with those personalities, sometimes when you have that partnership with your AEs, that can be a case where, okay, we're asking them about what discovery has been done. We go through the list. And it could be a case where, from an AE, is like, I'm trying to get this information more out of them. Is there a way that you could actually prompt in some questions in your discovery that could help us get to that particular point? I always
Yeah.
sometimes feel that people let their guard down when a solution engineer or a solution consultant comes in. It's a different person. They don't feel like they're being sold to, and they tend to relax
Yeah.
and open up more. So that can be a way that you can have a partnership with your team, your AEs, to get that information depending on the personas you're talking to.
Love that. No, that's great insight for sure. What would you say? So when it comes to like companies and hiring, there's always like a fine line, I feel like, between when you're drowning in demos and your SEs are like having too much in their hands, and then, there's times where it's like, okay, we have room for a lot more to take on. What's your take on like proactive hiring versus reactive hiring?
Yeah, reactive hiring is a recipe for disaster. I've been in companies where they have done that. It creates burnout, and we're then also having to hire people while getting leading a particular team with poor decisions. Generally,
Yeah.
what happens then is you rush your interview process, you lower your standards, you end up with a team that's just not aligned with what you're looking to achieve, and that again leads to churn and ultimately more problems down the line. And that's the knock-on effect. The price of hiring a bad hire is more than, taking that extra week or two to the search out, ensure that you've got the right decision made, asking more questions. So I'd always say proactive hiring, on the other hand, is just that strategic advantage, right? And it's very much a case where, suddenly, as you mentioned at the start, Gong is in a growth space where we're suddenly, rapid hiring. But it's always a case where you want to ensure that you have a bench ready and warmed up of players to come and join your team. So I'm
Yeah.
always thinking about building a pipeline of people in the background, keeping them warm to see where they are in their particular like growth phase, and thinking about 2 or 3 quarters ahead. If we were to get one or two more people, who could I reach out to? And then it's a case of don't only just get two people there, you need at least 10 to have on that bench because you don't know what's going to change at that time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
People may move on, they may get promoted, move into different areas of business. Things can change
Right.
in life. So I'd always say being proactive, ensuring that you have a short list of great candidates ready to fit your team and the culture. Invest in your future success, and think about not about fixing the current problem, but thinking about what could potential problems be in the future.
I love that this came from you as like a leader, as a manager, because as a recruiter, I'm always saying like you need to build your bench or like stop proactive hire or reactive hiring. And nobody believes me because they're like, of course, it's coming from a recruiter. But I love that you said it. So now it's going to be way more credible. And I'm going to use this till the end of time because it did not come from me.
Fire away, more than happy to.
Oh, awesome. What do you think separates? So it's actually a great segue into this. If somebody, let's just say you are currently either hiring or trying to build a bench, what do you think separates a good SE versus like an A player AC in your opinion that you'd be like, I want to keep them in mind even if we're not ready right now?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, it's kind of what separates the top from the middle of the pack or lower. Um,
Mhm.
so a good SE can run a demo, can hold themselves, can answer some questions, can potentially build out a proof of concept. They're technically able to answer those questions and follow a particular playbook. Um, an A player for me would be, I need them to be in the weeds of their territory, effectively be, the VP of sales for their territory know exactly the ins and outs. You're not waiting for a request, for an SE request to come in and say, need your help on this. They're proactively looking into their territory. They're acting as a partnership with their AEs, their sales managers, their VP of sales, all those different areas, and proactively looking for opportunities that they can add value to. I'd also say that they know their customers' business challenges at a deeper level. It's more of a case, I'm not in the manufacturing space, but I want to know exactly what are our manufacturers, what are their biggest problems? How can I talk their language as well? But also leading with empathy in that, having a full understanding of how you can help those individuals, being their trusted advisor, as we said, how we can get those, discovery questions out of them. And also, you're not just a technical resource. That's the biggest thing as well. Knowing that
Yeah.
you're not just, your day-to-day role is that. I think the lastly then is I think the biggest thing, and especially in Gong, is your relationships with your teammates. Both on your team from a sales engineering perspective, your sales reps, and cross functionally. It's having that honest feedback, be able to feel like you are like able to challenge your account executives. Give honest feedback to the product team, and constantly looking at ways that you can like improve the sales process. And that would be, it's like you're not like A players are not just closing deals; they are building partnerships.
Love that last line. I want to ask you your opinion. Like, obviously, what you just mentioned, and we talked slightly about this before, is what you are asking as a leader is not rocket science. It's just doing a little bit above and beyond. Why do you think that, like, most people knowing this, or in most talent out there knowing this, they still just don't take the action of being that A player? And I want to add to it too is like now everybody's also really worried about AI, but at the same time, I feel like not enough people are doing enough to try and make it stand out. So what's your take on that, and what tip would you give them, if anything?
Yeah, there's twofold on this I'd add to it, right? So first one there, what came to mind is generally when somebody knows what they need to do, and somebody could have been an A player and now they're just a good SE. That can happen where are not getting the recognition that they deserve. Um, few companies I've been in where we have put the sales rep up in lights, and it's only been them and they get all the credit. Of course, I get
Mm,
it. They have a quota, they have a harder target to hit than ourselves, and completely understand that they do have a lot on their plate. But I do think there is sometimes when some companies don't recognize and not even just a sales engineer, the SDRs and BDRs who got those, cold calling, hitting those numbers, and also multi-threading. There's also, the CSMs for helping for upsell renewals, but also professional services coming in and showcasing what we can do to help get that customer across the line. So I think that's one place where you can tend to, people know what's in front of them, but they can just get a little bit, I think it's easy to say somebody's like, oh, they know what they need to do, but they're just lazy. But that's not true, right? It's a case where there's certain dips and moments. It's very hard to run it 110% for so long. So it's how you keep them up
yeah.
to speed, how you keep that skill and will approach, and keep them recognized, keep them motivated. That's the biggest thing. And then twofold, I'd also say there's certain people who have it's also the company level. If a company is actually open and adopting AI, that's going to help teams to actually learn from that. If you have, the likes of Gemini, ChatGPT, you've got Clean, you've got all these different AI tools. Of course, I'm going to say Gong, but of course, plug the company. But it's very much a case where you have those tools at your disposal. It's about how you use them. And people who say that they're afraid of like losing their jobs to AI and that as well, it's very much a case. I don't think we're going to lose our jobs to AI. What we will is the people who don't adopt it will be left behind. The people who are utilizing it, sharing it, and utilizing it in the right way, they're the people who are going to turn out to be those A players.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that, because I do think that, and if anybody didn't catch it, I'm going to repeat it for you again. Sometimes it also falls on leadership. It is very, very important that as a leader, you're constantly motivating and pushing people in your team to be that A player. Like you said, it is hard to keep yourself accountable to 110% all the time. We're human beings, we fall off, life happens, personal things happen.
Mhm.
And as a leader, that is part of your job, is keeping your team motivated, keeping your team wanting to do more. And it all starts with that. Like, if the leadership is not requesting and pushing that type of culture, then automatically, as an A player, let's just say you really are one, you're doing it for some time, you see that, like you said, nobody's recognizing it, they don't care that you do it or not, so then they kind of back off and say, well, I'll just do what I know best and be a good SE. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's super important, and I do think that leadership holds a lot of that fault, quote unquote, to make sure that that that's the type of team you're creating. I will say this: one book that I live by a lot is called Gapology. It is a great book for any leader out there on how to hold your team accountable, how to build a players culture, and just build a company, or build a department where accountability starts personally, all the way up to leadership. And the cool thing about that book is, well, some leaders might not like it, but it makes everything your fault first. You fix it within you, and then you go and request that type of accountability from others as well.
Yeah, just one thing to add there as well, as you mentioned, in terms of that motivation piece, I think one thing is like know each individual on your team, know what their why is. Why do they get out of bed in the morning?
Very true.
Why are they working with you? Why are they working as a team? Why are they showing up every day? And that's both from a professional and a personal level. Professional, they might want to get to the next level. Might get promoted. They might want to go into leadership. Might want to have their own business at one stage. But then from a personal level, they may want to get engaged. You might want to buy a house. Like, what's their personal goals as well? And getting to know them and understanding them, that really helps you to figure out exactly how you motivate them and what they're motivated by.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, because honestly, as a leader, everybody's motivated by different things. You'll have some people on your team that they strictly are motivated by money because that's where they're at in their life right now. And then others that are motivated, like you said, just by buying a house or getting engaged or having a child. And as a leader, it's going to be your job to make sure that you tailor those whys to each person, because you can't talk to somebody that's motivated about money, about children. They'll be like, I don't care, you know? So that's pretty cool. Love that. And then I wanted to ask, kind of like as an ending question, just to kind of wrap everything up. For those that are watching, that either want to get into the space or just be better as an SE, or even be on your bench, if you're not hiring right now, just be part of your bench. What would you tell them to stand out and do better? And how can they get in front of you?
Yeah, I think the bits that we said in terms of like the CV piece and that approach is like, how do you stand out from the crowd? Get creative, utilize AI as well. Is definitely something that can be done. Just as much as you would research a company, why don't you research the person you're speaking to? Learn their background, see how like their journey through sales engineering, or learn more about them and get it like find somewhere that you have a bond with them or something that like clicks, so you have the same qualities. So that's something that can make you stand out when you go in for those interviews. But my biggest thing to like be like an aspiring SE right now, and something that I wish I learned from day one, was really understanding two things. Is one is your customer's business, and two, I think is fundamental, is storytelling. Learn those storytelling techniques and mastering. That's like a crucial part of being a sales engineer. But for those aspiring, it's like, even if you don't focus on the technical side, like learn about the industries that you're going to be selling to. Who is this company that I'm trying to get into, and who do they sell to? Read things like financial reports, listen to earning calls. Even on 1.5, they can be sometimes boring. But understanding the pain points and priorities of like CTOs, CFOs, other lines of business, and of course, like understanding that's going to help you understand their world, and be more valuable, so you can speak on their level. And when you're coming up with the ideas of like areas, or like, and as an example of something that has happened in your life, or like an emotion you've had, then it's a case where you try and turn it and frame it in their words. If you're something talking about like, you're an events business, try bring that into a SaaS world, and see how you can merge that into, selling as a service piece, a software as a service, right? The other piece then is utilizing AI. Some people learn differently, right? And rather than reading through documentation, if some people learn better through podcasts, I would say recommend Notebook LM. You can upload all those documentation, and then you can have your own very own tailored podcast in your ear when you go for a walk, or you're on the bus, or anything like that. The other part of that is, for those already in the role, you can always get better by mastering that art of storytelling. I'd say is like, you don't present features, right? Tell a story about how your product solves a problem. Use an emotional hook, the pain point. What we also say is like, find that pain and like open it up. And it's a case of showing them how you can like give them a clear narrative story of the before state, and then how it's better in the after state with your solution. And what I'd say is the best SEs are master of storytellers. They have that skill, and that's what sets you apart from everyone else. So that would be my number one, is mastering of storytelling.
I love that. I think that you gave actually so much tactical advice right there that if anybody's watching this live, we will have the replay afterwards. So you can literally go back and pause play to everything that Craig just said and take notes and start implementing that. And if I were to put everything that you just said into like 3 simple words would be continuously improving yourself. You showcasing that, I think it's like you just said as well on all your technical items, it's like how you would set yourself apart from others. So awesome. Thank you so much, Craig. This was amazing. There was so much insight shared here, so much tactical value where they can literally take so many notes, and I appreciate you joining. This was great for anybody in pre-sales specifically as an IC, or if you're just building an SC team. For those watching live or catching the replay, make sure to connect with Craig Ellis on LinkedIn. Put any questions in the comments. We'll get back to those as well afterwards as well, and we'll keep an eye on them. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Ari.